Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little advanced TV herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. Hey, TV Herstoryans. This is an interview with Jim Jax, who I met on Twitter. Jim is an experienced radio and podcast contributor, as well as blogger, talking about sports and media in sports, women in sports, anything there is to do with sports. Jim is going to give us some of his most encyclopedic knowledge about some really great women sportscasters who paved the way for those who we see today, including a few who are still on TV. Jim Jax.
When I was a kid, my father was a coach at a young age, and I had a great family. My mom and dad were very old-fashioned values, and they really instilled it into me. So I grew up really respecting women and appreciating women. And when I first started to coach, I didn't know where I wanted to take my career. But eventually at 29, I became the athletic director of a Christian high school, private school, and they pretty much had no women's sports or no girl sports. So I started several girl sports programs, and eventually our teams really became powerhouses, and we actually won some championships. We also had 60% of the kids in the school enrolled in sports. So it was just a really fun time to see these young girls become such good athletes. But also I had a rule with all the kids that if you got anything below a C in a class, you had to do mandatory study hall and you couldn't play. So I made the parents and the kids sign contracts. I also gave them, what was funny is the first thing I ever did is I coached the high school varsity basketball team. I took the cheerleaders and the players out and have them dress up and have them go out to dinner. And we went to a nice dinner, and I literally tried to show what I expected them in regards to respect to each other, respect for the school, their leadership role when it came to girls and guys. And it really changed our school, the outlook of it. So As I got older, I started writing in sports. The last 10 years I've been writing, and I wrote some controversial pieces on how female coaches and sportscasters weren't getting the credit that they deserved. I also wrote a bunch of pieces against the NFL and the Hall of Fame, and some of the discriminatory things that I saw against some players, and they went viral. And ESPN had me on their radio shows, CBS. I kind of became wanted for some of these controversial things, which I thought for a while I was going to be hated. So all of a sudden, everybody just kept telling me, write more, be on podcasts. So I became a real popular radio and podcast guest, and now I've started my own podcast. But I really hate injustice. And I hate some of the things that have gone on. I hate's a strong word, but I use it loosely. I don't use it loosely. I really do hate injustice and a lot of the corruption that goes on. And one of the biggest corruptions in sports is the lack of acknowledgement from female sportscasters in the past. Some that if I told you about them, no one would know who they were. And it really frustrates me. So that's kind of in a nutshell where I come from.
It is really frustrating, and that's why you are kind of the perfect guest on this podcast, recognizing that in the 90 or so episodes I have now produced, I have wondered before the movie Battle of the Sexes was released last summer, 2 summers ago, whatever. I did a pretty basic outline of the Billie Jean King, Bobby Riggs spectacle that it was, why it was, recounting the books that she has written and really how she parlayed her tennis career, her pioneering tennis career, into a really important leadership sort of curriculum almost. She is such a motivational speaker and has become now this resurgent icon of feminism that we really need today. So I talked about that. I talked about Sports Night initially, just framing that Aaron Sorkin series. And then, lo and behold, as I was doing I went in deep on an episode of That Girl where Anne Marie was mistaken for being a reporter, and then she gets this exclusive, but there's sort of a sexual quid pro quo in there against a very young Carol O'Connor. He was the guest star, Archie Bunker. And it was a sad reminder that in 1968, February of 1968, it was still kind of a joke that she would just have to, in order to get the story, she might just have to go ahead and, play hardball and take what's coming to her. And how that then manifested, it occurred to me, wait a second, there is that one episode of Sports Night where Natalie is on the hook. And how Natalie and Dana handle that. So, without going too much further into all that, I just have to ask, what did you think of Sports Night, and do you have it all memorized?
No, I think it's good. I think with Sports Night, and you look also at Billie Jean King, I know someone that knew Bobby Riggs. And he actually was a kid at that time, and he chauffeured Bobby Riggs around. Bobby Riggs was just an absolute con artist. He was just the most craziest guy, and he was a huckster. I mean, the guy was a guy,
and
a
gambler,
was a huckster.
Too. Yeah,
and
he was a gambler.
Huge
That's
gambler.
where he used to make his money.
Yeah, so he was a genius marketer, though, and people forget at that time that the ratings of that, 20,000 people filled the stadium, and the ratings were just absolutely through the roof.
Yeah.
And people just could not do it. And what I love about Billie Jean King especially is that she is such a ball of energy, and so many men respected her in the tennis game because her knowledge of tennis is amazing. She could attack you, or she could be aggressive with you in a way that you didn't know it. She had tact, and she had a good personality, and she was obviously one of the greatest of all time. So I think with all this, I think it shows the struggle that they had just to get respect from men, especially during that time. There's still some right now that I read a tweet not too long ago with Beth Mowins, and some guy literally said, what in the world does that woman know about football? She's never played it. She's never coached it. Why in the world is she on? This is ridiculous. And he even called her a token, I think. So there's the viciousness that you see, and I'm on Twitter a lot, and I love Twitter, but the viciousness that you see when men attack women that are part of sports is just, it's vile, but it's real. And that's why I'm real picky with who follows me. I don't want nonsense like that on my timeline.
Sure. Well, so we're going to talk a little bit about some of those pioneers, about some of the women who actually were, the first ever to broadcast some place or some sport, some names that if you're old enough, you might recognize them. And if you are young, what you're going to hear is that there have actually been some really powerful, well-trained women in the broadcast booth, on the field, doing some really incredible things, and now they have all but vanished. And I say all but because one of the things I want to do, Jim, when I introduce a name, is I also want to say how many Twitter followers they have, so that people can really understand that once they get put out to pasture, sometimes they fall off the total radar, and that's kind of sad too, because men's TV sports, they will resurrect the oldest, most craggly faced guy, stick a suit on him and put him on for a half an hour on a Sunday and act as though we've just been visited by, this great deity. And that just kills me.
Well, I think it's shallow. Women are so, you look at the transformation, ESPN and some of these stations have given women a lot of opportunities, but on the side, they're also still making them sexual objects. You look at the sportscasters, and the first thing you do when you get hired by ESPN and all these other things, you do a makeover. And some of them even get made fun of a little bit because they look like they're 16-year or 18-year-olds going clubbing. They're dressed so weird.
Yeah.
So,
and they have to wear sleeveless dresses and
they got to tan. They got their blonde highlights, and their eyes wide open when they talk. I mean, it's just so weird how they act, and that really is what bothers me. But when you look into history And it's funny that you say that because Brent Musburger, who I think is 80, just got hired by the Raiders this year to be their broadcaster. And name all the 80-year-old women that are
That's Jane
broadcasters.
Fonda. That's Jane Fonda.
Yeah. I mean,
Betty White.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't see it because they're so judged by their looks, where men, they go out there and I mean, they bring them out wheelbarrows and put them in their chair. And it's like, oh my God, he's an icon. It's but a woman after 40, it's like, oh, you better go get Botox. You better go get surgery. But the names that bothers me so much, I think the greatest all-around sports person in the history of women's sports is Ann Myers. Ann Myers was one of the greatest female basketball players. She was the only one, I think, in history that as a high school person, she was asked to be on the national team. And she was an amazing player at UCLA. And she also was an encyclopedic type mind when it came to the game. And eventually, she was the first woman, I think the only, Nancy Lieberman got her tryout, but she got a tryout in 1979 to play for the Indiana Pacers. And she got paid $50,000 for this. And she tried out for 5 days. She made the first cut and she then got cut after the second cut. But the players said they said she was better than some of the men. I mean, she was amazing. And at that time, women were really looked down upon when it came to basketball. Then, not too long after that, the Pacers were so enamored with her knowledge, they hired her as an analyst for their games. This is the 80s. It's 1983 and 84. I mean, can you imagine that? And no one says a word about her. She then married Don Drysdale, Double D, which is one of the greatest pitchers of all time for the Dodgers. And in 1993, the Chicago Bulls, in the height of the Michael Jordan era, said, we want Ann Myers. They contacted Ann Myers and said, this analyst job is yours. Don sadly died that year of a heart attack, and at only, I think he's 56, and she wouldn't take the job. But eventually, as time went on, she became not only the vice president of the Phoenix Mercury, she was the vice president of the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, but we don't talk about Ann Myers. She's not on holding court on. When
I say Ann Myers, they go, who's that? And I'm saying this woman she was in the front office. She was one of the iconic players. She was one of the iconic minds in the analysts. She was amazing. And she was one of the most iconic people in the front office. And
she's still alive. She's only 63.
I've contacted her. I'm trying to get her on a podcast. And awesome. I love Ann Myers. And I'm going to tout her name until the end of time. And
I'll beat the drum right there with you.
Yeah, those are the type of people that the male sportscasters don't say a word about because they're jealous, I think, partially, and also because they don't respect women.
All right, I'm going to throw some more names at you. Feel free to riff a little bit, but graduate of one University of Notre Dame, Hannah Storm. Hannah Storm has had a phenomenal career.
Hannah is one of those people that her personality just really evokes excitement. And that's a person that loves sports. And when she talks about sports and she talks about it, she's not phony. She enjoys it and she loves it. And that's why people, men and women, love watching her because she's a bright person. She had a great education and she's always been a personable person. She gets it. And
she's currently calling Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime.
Right. Yeah.
So two women, she and Andrea Kramer. Yeah.
I love Andrea Kramer. But these are people, I think she's the kind of person that I think that the networks kind of looked for because she was personable and she was likable. And I think that was the big thing. But she's really a nice person and you enjoy listening to her. And I think that's what I like about Hannah. I mean, on the Olympics, she does an amazing job. Pretty much anything she does, she's just pleasant to listen to. So I'm a big Hannah fan.
And just on a personal note, it feels like her work ethic is as strong as any, given the fact that a couple of years ago she had that crazy propane gas or, LP tank kind of went up in flames and caused her all sorts of burns. And she was like out less than 2 months and back in the broadcast booth. And I got to give her credit that, she knew her career and her face, not her face literally, but her face and voice are part of her brand, and she needed to get back out there.
So I like her. She's good.
All right. So folks, if you're looking for new people to follow on Twitter, smart feminist women who are right there in the thick of it. Hannah Storm has 217,000 Twitter followers, but she is not the most in the list that we're going to talk about, nor is she the least. Lesley Visser of Boston College. Lesley Visser is a true pioneer. So, she has been around since the earliest days, but most importantly, coming on to tell the Lesley Visser story for me.
Lesley Visser has been kind of the whipping girl, if I could say that. Lady, no one get upset, but because she married Dick Stockton, and Dick Stockton was an icon. So she took a lot of heat for him supposedly paving the way for her. But in reality, she has been a pioneer in a lot of different things. She was doing the Final Four. She was doing the NBA Finals, the World Series. I believe she's the only woman to do like 7 different sports. And she was doing Olympics before it was kind of hip, and Monday Night Football. I mean, she was really involved in a lot of stuff, and she really worked hard. And I think she got a bad rap because of Dick Stockton and people claiming that he had paved the way. She did a lot of research, and when she came on the air, she knew her stuff, and that's what I liked about her. I learned something pretty much every time she talked, and that's what I love. She did the sideline report. I mean, she is the first in so many things. She started at the Boston Globe and won several awards covering so many sports. She also broke the story, which also gave her a bad name, of the 1978-79 Boston College point shaving scandal that involved the Boston College players. They were involved in this point shaving scandal, and the famous player that was involved was Michael Bowie with the New York Mafia, and she bravely uncovered this story showing gamblers and mafia people involved in this, and she was one of the main cogs to get this story out. And it was really brave of her to do that, especially at that time when women were really not supported in the sporting world. So she's done a lot where you got to give her some real props. A brave lady.
Yes, brave lady, actually covering a couple different journalistic platforms. If she really started out as this print reporter, has moved over to broadcast booth for TV as well as for radio, and covered so many sports in the process. And so to your point, Jim, I just have to say that women are kind of used to two things. Either men literally holding the door open and creating an opportunity for them. And that's in TV, that's in music, that's in any industry. If you've got somebody, and Sheryl Sandberg certainly in Lean In talks about the fact that, there are men out there who really can run a little bit of interference for you and make sure that you get the opportunity you deserve. You don't turn that down. You don't turn that down. Now, by marrying it, is that a bad thing? Well, there are power couples in every industry. But what a great way to sort of denigrate all of her hard work by saying, well, no, it was really him. If she had turned out to be an embarrassment, well, then that criticism would have been well deserved. But Lesley Visser, who is not on Twitter at all, but is an asset to American journalism in general and sports journalism in particular. I'm glad you passionately told the story of the Boston Globe and point shaving and Boston College, because, otherwise nobody thinks about that. And I'm guessing that media studies professors and students listening to this podcast aren't gonna, it's not on their syllabus. All right.
Yeah.
But here might be a name on their syllabus. Phyllis George, who, by all accounts, is sort of the godmother of at least modern TV sports reporters. And the thing is so far, listeners, we talked about Hannah Storm coming out of Notre Dame, Lesley Visser out of Boston College. They were journalism, English majors. They knew this is what they wanted to do. Phyllis George actually landed on TV more or less via the pageant circuit, which across TV and across journalism, she certainly isn't the first. But she goes back to 1970 as Miss Texas, 1971 as Miss America, which was back then a really, really big deal. But Phyllis George broke some ground. Tell us about that, Jim.
Phyllis George was a part of one of the most controversial football productions on CBS with Jimmy the Greek and Brett Musburger. They had brought her in, and it was amazing. I think she also, someone had told me once, I think she was one of the only high school kids that was actually involved in the pageants, and she was just obviously a beautiful lady. But she was really nice, and she was a bright lady too. But she was that beauty that personable person, because Brett Musburger at times can be real abrasive, and Jimmy the Greek is mega abrasive. So they needed someone in there, and Irv Cross was a really nice guy. So they needed people in there that could really do their to kind of get people in. And they also kind of went after women viewers. They wanted to get women more of a part of football, and it worked, because look at now. I mean, now women are a huge part of football. 45% of NFL fans are females, so it's a huge deal now for females to be fans. But back then, it really wasn't. It was like, oh crud, my husband's going to sit and drink beer and watch Sunday football all day. I'll go shopping or something. Where now she made it kind of fun. She did a lot of stories that were interesting. And another thing she never gets credit for is she was a big part of the CBS horse racing shows, because horse racing was huge at that time, especially during this Secretariat era and all that, and winning the Triple Crown. So she was a big part of the Preakness and the Belmont. And also, she gave the CBS Morning News and the CBS Sports show, NFL Today, a lot of publicity. She was on the cover of People magazine. She was on the cover of several magazines. She even did a guest spot on the Muppet Show. So she was kind of that person that they could put in any avenue of media for publicity. So CBS really, she kind of was out there saying, hey, it's okay for women to be a part of this. And you got to give her credit.
And she was well spoken. There was never any controversy. She did end up going on to be First Lady of the state of Kentucky. Yeah. So she married well, and she kind of did the whole Southern thing. But she probably has some amazing stories to tell. And you just have to wonder if she were to do has she ever done her memoir? I have to say I don't know that answer. I wish she would consider doing her memoir as unfiltered and straightforward. Give it to us straight, because I believe she probably survived many, many situations that we would shake our heads today and say she sure didn't deserve to be in that situation. But by virtue of her being a woman and the mid 70s, late 70s, and being as attractive as she was, I would expect she's got some stories to tell.
Oh, I don't even want to know, really. I think it's so. I think a lot of them, and I don't blame them if they don't speak out, because it is a real traumatic thing. You look at anybody. That's why I fight with males all the time. Whenever an athlete gets caught, doing something with the women, the fans want to protect the athlete, and they don't care about the victim. And I respect Phyllis George. She got a lot of flack for being eye candy, and she was to a point, but she was also a smart lady and a nice person and a personable person, and people really liked her, and she brought a lot of female fans.
She brought a lot of female fans, and for many women watching TV who didn't know that, they maybe knew that she was a beauty queen, but they also respected her for being able to do interviews, which means maybe I should major in journalism. And so, by her being on TV in such respectable, high-profile positions for so long, she undoubtedly influenced thousands and thousands of women in terms of them seeing what they could be. And similarly, at about that same time, Jayne Kennedy, again, another name who's sort of fallen off. Jayne Kennedy is actually on Twitter, and folks, you could be her 220th Twitter follower, because that's how many she has right now. She kind of she just stepped away from the whole business many, many years ago, but there was a time when she was the big deal.
Oh,
Tell
yeah.
us a little bit about Jayne.
Jayne was also a beauty queen. She won a Miss pageant. Can't remember what state she was from, but she was
Ohio.
She was just a natural beauty and just really a nice person. She was well liked. She won a lot of awards. I believe she was one of the first African American women to win Miss Ohio. I mean, she was just really an amazing career in the beauty pageant. She also followed in the Phyllis George. They wanted someone to kind of be the next Phyllis George with the NFL today. So they brought her in. Another interesting lady, too, because she did a lot of TV. People forget. She actually did Traveling with Bob Hope. She was a semi-regular in Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, which if you're too young, look that up. It was a real famous show at the time. For her to come on again, Phyllis was kind of the first, but she was the next. She did that famous series that you could find on YouTube, The Greatest Sports Legends. And she was the only female host of that show, and she was signing contracts for to be a spokesperson for different companies like Coke. And so
breaking
she
out.
was way ahead of her time with that, because no one else really thought of that for women. So I think she kind of marketed herself really well.
You know, and I have to wonder whether or not everybody from Robin Roberts, who we're going to talk about in a second, to Oprah Winfrey and Gayle King, they had to have been keeping a very close eye on every door that Jayne Kennedy was breaking open and just saying, okay, if she can do it, we can do it. We need to get in there. We need to make a difference. And listeners, the context in this is, you know, so Phyllis George is kind of the mid-70s, you know, that sort of Charlie's Angels time. And then you start getting into the later 70s where all of a sudden the whole idea of jiggle wasn't quite as acceptable because people were expecting more. And here shows Jayne Kennedy just delivering more at a time when the women's sports, not even talking about men's sports, women's sports was explosive. I mean, we can, you know, we can honor Venus and Serena for the phenomena that they present when they play. But at that time, tennis was at its early strength with Chris Everett, and Billie Jean had finally retired, but Martina was still playing it. I mean, there was just, the list was so long. Same with women's golf. And there was just such a national rally around it, which sort of fell in with the ERA, which sort of fell in with Title IX, and the fact that by 1980, there had been Title IX girls finally hitting their high school years to play sports. And because that's kind of my time. And so you might have had a little bit of sports offered before Title IX required there to be sports. But all of a sudden, if you're a woman covering sports, the girls' stories and the women's stories and the participation stories, it kind of crossed the line sometimes between public policy and sports, because these women knew exactly how important it was for all women to see it. So, I
mean, look at Olga Corbett before in 1972. Olga Corbett, before the 1972 Olympics, the most crowd that had ever seen a gymnastic contest was 500. If you got 200 or 300 into a place, when she came to 1972 Olympics and she did her Corbett flip, which is now outlawed because it's too dangerous. But when she did that, she turned the world upside down. Richard Nixon had her come to the White House so he could meet her. And he said, you did more for the Cold War communication in a month than I've done my whole life. And he said, you are just and after that, there was schools all over the world popping up. She would get millions of mail and all the little girls would write was Olga. They wouldn't put her address. They would just put Olga. And she would come home and she'd have bags of it. So the 70s was such an important part for not only broadcasting, but also for women's sports. Because before that,
and it was before cable. Cable made everything available. So it was really the three major the three major networks, and not 24/7 coverage. It was kind of, 7 in the morning until 1 in the morning was kind of the full coverage. Let's just jump right into really from day one ESPN or thereabouts early. Gail Gardner. And there's a name that nobody talks about, although I would expect older men probably recognize the name of Gail Gardner.
Yeah, Gail was really good in baseball. So I think she had a really good she had a good delivery with a lot of it. And a lot of times in that time in the 80s and 90s, they had a lot of abrasive people. So when she came on, she was really important because she did not only ESPN, she was also a part of NBC Sports. And she, for about a 7-year period, she's probably the most powerful female sportscaster. She did she did the Olympics, she did Wimbledon, she did tennis, college football really liked her. She even did that short-lived show NFL Live, and baseball, obviously, she was really good. And also, she was controversial. She was a member of the NBC broadcast team during the 49ers Cincinnati Super Bowl. So she, and some people weren't too hip on that. So, but her play-by-play of the baseball games, of the Rockies and Reds, and you know what, where I remember seeing her too, is she did a couple of shows for the Food Network. And she worked for them for 3 years, and I remember her getting interviewed on there once about it. So I like her. She's an old school type announcer, and I'm a big Gail Gardner fan.
And we need Gail Gardner basically helping young women helping everybody incubate really solid shows. She should be teaching, pretty much master's level sports journalism, as well as, how to navigate the field of male sports and to just demand more and expect more and to get out of those sticky situations that I'm sure she has stories about as well. But really, what a talented woman back then. I mean, there was so much less technology. You had to know how to produce, even if you were in front of the camera. So much more was expected of you, and the budgets were less. And so, I get concerned that someone like Gail, who has almost no digital footprint, no online presence at all, really, we are going to let a lot of expertise and a lot of great perspective pass.
I try not to judge them too much because that was such a bad time. And a lot of these women really went through hell. I would really want her to do good things, and I would really want her to do it. And maybe I'll reach out to her and see if I can't do something with her. And because I agree with you totally, but again, I'm not in her shoes. It's easy for me to say. I didn't go through what she went through. But what's interesting about her, what you bring up, is that she was a behind the scenes person. She was not only a person that was on air, she knew what was going on behind the scenes, and she used that talent. And that's where I like the Penny Marshalls and people like that, where they said, you know what, I don't want to be, and the woman, I can't remember, Betty Thomas, I think it was from Hill Street Blues. It's like, I'm not just going to do it. I want to run the whole thing. And those are the type of talents that I love. And I would love to see Gail do something too. I wish, you know what I would like, because I would like ESPN to reach out to these people, these pioneers, and do a show that would teach younger people, younger women and younger men, to educate them what they went through, and also to teach younger women, hey, this is what we went through. This is what you should do. I think, why can't you do a 4 or 5 part series? Gosh, I would, the ratings would be through the roof.
I'm with you. I'll sign that petition. All right, let's jump ahead a little bit to somebody who is still very much in the field. Gail Sierens is still on WFLA, right? That's where she got to start. And then she went national a little bit? Or did she? Yeah.
Gail is just the nicest, most humble person in the history of the world. I love that lady. I've read a lot of things on her, and she was really a pioneer, obviously, in football. And what was amazing is that she was a anchor for Florida. She was an icon. Her alma mater was the Seminoles at Florida State, and she became a Tampa staple. You know how news people stay there and they just become icons, and that's what she did. But she did something interesting. Instead of just being a newscaster, she says, I want to be the sports. I want to do sports. So they allowed her to do the weekend sports anchor. And we're talking 1970s. We're not, I think it's in 77 or 78, she became the weekend sports anchor. We're not talking 90s. I mean, we're talking 77, 78 when women sportscasters were not a thing. So she became the first female sportscaster on that part of the country. She won many awards. Eventually, she was asked in 1977 to be the first woman to do play-by-play, and she was asked to do the Seahawks Kansas City Chiefs game. I think it was in a little bit after Christmas. Mm-hmm. She was really excited to do it. Her station wasn't. They didn't want her to go national, but they told her okay. After that, and she did it, and it was groundbreaking. The funniest part of the whole thing is that when you do play-by-play, you have spotters. And here she is being judged by everybody in the world. And the spotter on the kickoff gave her the wrong name of the player that made the tackle. So her first call was wrong. So, oh my gosh, they just had a field day. But eventually she, did really well. They had asked her to do it. She was reluctant to do it because she had a great job. She had great money. She really didn't want to get involved in it. And to show how the networks weren't really into this, no woman did another NFL game for 30 years. So this wasn't exactly a popular thing at the time right. to do. So for her to do this was amazing. So, but when you ask people who was the first woman to ever do a NFL game, no one comes up. If you ever want to be in a bar and win a drink, bring that one up. No one knows who Gail Sierens is. What I love about her is she has reached out to several of the female broadcasters now, and she is so gracious and so kind, and she gives them all the credit. And she says, "I'm yesterday's news. You're blazing trails now. I'm so proud of all of you." She is a real genuine, just a special person. So she's another one that never gets the credit she deserves. But wow, she's one of a kind. She's an icon.
Yeah, and still in the business and having now seen the business through literally 40 years of technology and of standards and sort of how some news comes around, a couple times actually in the circle of life, so to speak. Gail Sierens, listeners, is you can find her on Twitter, and that's Gayle Sierens, Sierens, a Florida icon. The kind of cool thing, I guess, is Florida has such a strong base of all the major sports and women's sports, and certainly spring training and everything else that happens. And really, she should be talking to every nationally recognized school of journalism for men and women to talk about what she has lived through, what she has seen, and the kind of work ethic and skills that are necessary from both in order to really get the story and not just be another piece in the sports journalism machinery that so many come to be. All right. Going to move on to, I think, the biggest name that we have on this list, because she just has really sort of hit the pinnacle, is Robin Roberts, who graduated from Southeastern Louisiana University. We don't know her today as a sports reporter. We do know her to have 1.1 million Twitter followers, and that's because she is now an icon on morning TV, Good Morning America, and really helped turn that show around. But tell us about Robin's origins and the early days in Southern stations and then up to ESPN and ABC.
Now, I'm not going to get in trouble here, but here's an African-American woman wanting to get into sports, and she's from the South. I'm going to let you add it up. But what I loved about Robin is that she was a great athlete, and she really did a lot of great things, and she was a good student. She really did a lot of things. She was involved in her student body at Abilene Christian, and she really came from a great family. I think her big thing, I remember in the ESPN speech she did, she said, "My parents told me the 3 Ds, discipline, determination, and Lord." So she's a really a real go-getter and a spunky person, and she's very positive. She did a lot of the ESPN at that time. She was very well respected among the athletes, and what I liked about her is a lot of the athletes seemed reluctant to do interviews with women. They just thought, oh, God, okay, whatever. Where Robin could keep up with them with their knowledge, and she would one-up them. And if they kind of gave a little smart-mouthed answer or something like that, she would come right back at them. And she was tough as nails. And I loved Robin because she just had that personality. She's also a lot like Billie Jean King, where she walks into a room and she just kind of brightens everything up, and she's just really got that personality. But, and she's another one that never gets her due. So she was the sports anchor in 1983 in Hattiesburg, and then she also did in Biloxi. So here she was in the, African-American woman in the young 80s, where sportscasting for women is still not excitable for anybody. Mm-hmm. The networks hate it. And here she is doing it in the Deep South. And WAGA TV in Atlanta, which is a huge station there, begged her to come, and she did. She worked there for 3 years, and she also did radio. She hosted her own radio show. So when she joined ESPN in 90 or 91, I can't remember exactly what year, she was a staple. She did women's sports, men's sports. She did interviews. She did specials. Had that big catchphrase that ESPN used to say, "Go on with your bad self." That was her big moniker. So she also, ABC borrowed her, so they actually paid her to do some stuff on ABC, and that's where she got her connections to do Good Morning America, which ESPN probably regrets now. But
so listeners, from then, if you want to start putting together a timeline of where these women fit in, and you've got Phyllis George at the beginning, and then you have Lesley Visser kind of rolling in, and Gail Gardner, and then 1990, sort of, so it's now truly ESPN is a fixture in households because it's part of cable, and because that, they've really gotten very accomplished at finding the stories. And so there was just a lot more content to roll through. And it took someone, it was no longer a beauty queen who could really tackle that level of journalistic acumen. It needed somebody who knew sports and who could ask tough questions, because you needed to fill time and you needed to really get the story, because all of a sudden it became a very competitive field. So even though she left ESPN in 2005 and then sort of brightened every morning on Good Morning America, she really is at a level that she should be able to command any position in journalism that she wants, if she were to want it. And I think right now she might just be saying, hey, I like what I'm doing, but I still think we should be giving her greater props.
I think the problem also with her is when she got a really nasty cancer, and that really kind of limited her.
Two cancer, breast cancer, and then her bone. Her bone disease.
It spread with that, and she was really brave about it, because what I liked about her is she just came out right. And when she was struggling, she'd tell you, I'm struggling, but I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to be positive. She really touched a lot of lives, and she got a huge social media following because of her bravery and because of the way she handled it. So I have nothing but mounds of respect.
There are two more names, Jim, before we sign off here. There are two more names who right now are in the thick of it. And so this is sort of an opportunity to raise consciousness for women who otherwise, like me, pretty much zip right past any channel that's showing men playing sports, because I just won't do it anymore. And I'm expecting only male voices to be talking to me while we're doing it, while I'm listening or watching. Doris Burke, who is really in the thick of it with the NBA still. And then Bonnie Bernstein, who just it sounds like is everywhere, writing and broadcasting and putting in analysis where it needs to be. What can these two women, are they in it for the long haul? Do you think we're going to be seeing them for another 10 or 20 years?
Doris Burke is a dynamo. She is like this ball of energy, and she is so well respected in the NBA that players will come up to her before games to make sure that they talk to her. She is so well respected, and she was the first female commentator for a New York Knicks game. She's done the NBA, and she had to fight when she became a sideline reporter. This is another great thing for young women to think. When she became a sideline reporter, she said, I'm disappointed. I don't want her to be a sideline reporter. I want to do the games. And she brought up a fuss, and they got sick of her complaining, and she got her chance. And you know what? She's one of the best in the business. She won the Kurt Gowdy Award. And for some of you that don't know who Kurt Gowdy was, one of the greatest announcers of all time, she won the Kurt Gowdy Award and was selected to the Basketball Hall of Fame in 2018. That's how good she is. And if you were to talk to a lot of people, unless you're a hardcore NBA guy, a lot of people don't even know who she is. And she is amazing. She is so talented. I love listening to her do games. She also played college basketball for Providence at that time. She also has a sports background, but she's always wanted to do this. She's won so many awards I can't even count them anymore. And she's only 52. I mean, she's just starting.
Right.
I mean, this lady's just going to be for the next 20 years. She's going to be amazing. All this other stuff, she did this purely on her talent and her chutzpah to say, I am not going to be in the background. I want to do games. I don't care if I'm a woman. I want to do games. And she did. And I'm telling you, to be in the Hall of Fame, wow, that's big time.
And I would like to think that every time she participates, every time she is calling a game, providing color, providing analysis, same with the women who right now, are holding down, keeping the light on for the NFL. They are changing the way that the stories get told. They are changing the way the questions get asked, and they are making the broadcast booth more approachable for the next generation of women, that there be more women, that there be more men covering women's sports, and that those who are being reported on get the same amount of respect as the women who are doing the reporting. I think that time has come. And Jim, I think we're preaching to the choir on this one. We get to hear straight talk from competitive women in a way that that isn't judging them for being too ambitious, for being too arrogant, for being too aggressive. This is them talking about other women and letting these other women show us what it is. While now we have a generation of player who can sit in the broadcast booth, in the commentary booth, and add that extra layer of definition and meaning. So knowledgeable on all of these. I mean, this really deep stuff that, women are paying attention to women at all sorts of industries, and we're trying to remember it all. And Herstory, covers business as well as sports, as well as, education. How are we going to remember everybody? And, we're really grateful that there are guys like you who have been paying attention all along and absolutely celebrate the accomplishments of some of these women, and also see how it is that it tees up all of the opportunity for the women who are in college today, the girls who are sitting in high school, putting together sports shows for their high school teams and trying to produce a little TV show for their local cable. I think it's just exciting that we take this moment and celebrate the tremendous work of these women who are no longer necessarily in the game, or those who are showing up every week, week in and week out, to cover seasons of men and women playing sports at all levels. So, Jim,
it's so exciting.
You're awesome.
Well, thank you so much. You are too. I mean, I belong to the Raiders Podcast Network, and the first thing we did was we have an all-female podcast, one of the few in the United States, really. We have two females, great, Angria and Jenny, that host it, and they host it. They do a great job, so we're very proud of them, the Just One Ladies podcast. And I just feel women enjoy sports just as much as men, but we have this old boys network and this club that we don't want to let people in. But when you look at the accomplishment of these great people, and you wanted to talk about Bonnie Bernstein, I'll give a real quick. Bonnie Bernstein is great, but she is the recipient of all these amazing people that blaze these trails, from Gail Sirens to all these other people, Doris Burke, to all these people that have blazed these trails and opened these doors. And Bonnie is just, it's amazing what you can accomplish when you respect respect the people that came before you. And I think if you're a young person, get your laptop out there. You want to live feed your junior high game and announce it and make a tape of it. Go ahead, practice, go at home, do what you need to do. Mm-hmm. But if you want to get into this business, start now. You're lucky. I didn't have all this stuff when I was young. You have all this stuff and you should use it. It's cheap. So it's exciting time for women's sports, but please remember those that blaze the trails, because society doesn't, and it really bothers me.
I think we have some opportunity to continue connecting with all these women who are out there, as well as the listeners. And if my listeners want to get a hold of either you or the Raiders Podcast Network, tell us the names of some of those podcasts again, particularly the one that is hosted by women.
Just Win Ladies. It's a fun time. Jenny and Angria host it. It's justwinladies.com. They do a great job. They're fun. The Pillaging Podcast is one of the best Raiders podcasts in the country. And then we've started a podcast, Fire and Ice Raiders Podcast. And we're talking a little bit football, but we're trying to get more social as well, have it a little bit more fun, little mainstream. And that's what I'm doing with my great partner, Sean Hildebrandt.
All right. Well, Jim, I'm gonna close out this really great conversation. We have talked about all these firsts and calling the first this game and the first that game. Listeners, I'll just say follow Jim Jax Media, because he's right on top of it with just kind of calling the cultural trends that we're seeing and standing up for those who need a little extra. He's there. So, Jim, this has been a tremendous opportunity to talk sports and to talk about some of the best women we will ever see and hear on TV, and perhaps it will set the stage for a whole new crop of great women sportscasters at all levels. And that's maybe something we should talk about again in the future.
Listeners, it's been a lot of fun bringing you this conversation with Jim Jax. If you want to hear more about TV women and sports, either the women athletes and those fantastic moments we've seen on TV, or more about the sports reporters, then drop us a line at advancedtv herstory, that's all one word, at gmail.com. Find us on Twitter at TV Herstory. You can always track us down on Facebook if you're still there at Advanced TV Herstory, a podcast. But remember, we also think of this as just an audio show as well. So as you have the opportunity to share how to access what is called podcasts with people who don't currently listen to podcasts, just let them know it's a matter of finding the right place and hitting the play button. And we've got close to 100 episodes that we'd be more than happy to share with them. So find us on Radio Public, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Thanks so much to Jen Eads for audio editing, and to Catherine Yang for all her work on our video component, which is mostly what you'll find on YouTube. Also follow us on Instagram at Advanced TV Herstory. And a very big thanks to Jim Jax for the time he spent with us on this phone call. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.